Hey everybody, John Cavelli here with Trombone Is Enough, and my distinguished guest today is the great Michael F. Hunt. Michael, say hi to the audience.
Hello out there.
So, as you know, I interview trombonists because we never get interviewed. So the first thing you told me was that you stopped playing in COVID. You kind of retired from tromboning.
Yes, so a week from today I will be 78.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding.
No.
That's not what I would have guessed. You're a young 78.
Oh, thank you.
Was COVID, tell me if you don't mind, I'm curious what happened or what contributed to that decision.
Well, I took a job in 2001 in Indianapolis, but I continued to live in St. Louis. So I would commute on Mondays and Fridays to Indianapolis. And everybody in St. Louis thought I had died because I wasn't around anymore. And I came back to St. Louis after that job ended in about 2010, 2011, and by that time everybody was certain I had died, and a lot of my contacts had died due to my age, and I just lost contact with a lot of people, and I wasn't getting any gigs. And then COVID hit, and there were even fewer gigs, and the industry shut down. So at that time I decided COVID sent me a message that I should retire. And at that time I resigned from the Musicians Union, and I sold my trombone. And also at my age I was having stamina problems, getting enough breath to keep playing. And the last thing I want to do is go on stage and literally die.
Right. Yeah, that would be embarrassing.
Oh yeah. Nobody would stop talking about that.
Well, nobody would stop talking unless they knew something had happened. They'd just keep talking.
So that's how I say COVID retired me.
I understand. And when you said trombone, that was singular. You only had one.
I only had one. I had a Bach Mount Vernon with an F attachment.
Okay.
And
Mount Vernon. I've heard of this. This is.
Oh yeah, these are
top notch. Like, don't make them there anymore in Mount Vernon.
Top notch relic.
Yeah.
And they were top of the line trombone for a long time. They had a wonderful tone, ease of play. It was a fantastic instrument, and I was very sad to sell it.
Yeah. Well, I hope you got a good price. Doug Burt. Do you know Doug?
He's up in North St. Louis.
He's in Kirkwood.
Yeah.
But has a business where he buys and sells. And
I sold it to him.
Oh, okay. then you got a good price. Yeah. He single-handedly changed my playing life, helping me understand that I had been playing on equipment that was just too big for me, and so that really changed my playing to go to smaller stuff. But he's great.
Well, I did a lot of switching back and forth from jazz to classical.
Oh, you did?
So I needed a full big horn.
Right, okay.
For the symphonic sound.
Yeah, and you played in the symphony?
I was a sub for a while.
Okay.
I took trombone lessons from Bernie Snyder. And he at that time was the first chair player in the symphony. And this was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And when the symphony was doing summer stuff, they could take vacations.
Right.
And when Bernie went on a vacation, he would stick me into the second spot, and they moved the second guy up to the first place.
Okay.
And the first time I did it was the scariest thing in the world. It's a wonderful story.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was my first time with symphony players.
Okay.
So I'm sitting there, and they're reading books. Right?
Yeah.
It's rehearsal.
Yeah.
They're reading books, and I'm sitting there, and I'm counting on all my fingers and toes, and it's been 200 measures, right? And I know I'm right, and I know I'm supposed to come in like 4 measures, and they're still reading books.
A book. Yeah.
Right. And I said, This is a test. They're going to wait till the last possible moment to see if I'm going to get it, right?
Like chicken.
Like chicken.
Yeah.
And I kept waiting and I kept waiting. I said, I know I'm right. So I came in and I played the lick, right? And they looked at me, and when that piece was over, Roger Davenport looked at me and says, "Oh, that's how that goes. We always missed it." I was going to kill him.
That's so funny. That's great. That's really great. I know Tim Myers. Was he in the group?
No, that's long before Tim. Yeah, okay. You forbid I'm an old guy.
Well, I still can't believe that. Well, I hope to look. I'm 20 years away from 78, and my goal is to stay as in good a health as I can. And I'm already noticing those stamina issues you were talking about.
Yeah, they'll sneak up on you.
Man, I tell you, my body is getting older than, or older quicker, I guess, and it just takes longer to warm up, and more and more body issues. But I'm curious. Well, I've been listening to your compositions.
Well, you have,
and I'm just amazed, and I love the stuff I've heard. And what keeps coming to my head is, at what point did you decide that you wanted to compose? I'd like you to talk about that at some point in our talk, but I think that's got to be a decision of time, how you're going to spend your time. It sounds like you've spent a lot of time working at composing.
Oh, yes.
Did that take time away from trombone playing, and what made you decide all that?
Well, my primary instrument is piano.
Oh, okay.
And I never practiced enough to be really good. I was at that edge point where if I really practiced, I could be good.
Okay.
But if I practiced, I wouldn't have time to write. And so I took the time for writing. And you asked when I made that decision? 7.
7 years old.
7 years old.
Really?
Yeah, I started piano at 7. And I immediately knew I wanted to write music. By 12, I was playing piano in a professional country western band.
Really?
Yeah, it was great. You know what a C melody sax is?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're a horrible instrument.
Right.
But there was this older lady who ran this band, and she played C melody sax, and she would read the piano parts over my shoulder.
Oh.
So she didn't have to transpose anything, right? So we played Rambling Rose and Yellow Rose of Texas and all this stuff. And then all of the string players didn't read music.
Oh.
So I was 12 years old, and we played the 4-H hog barn every Friday night. Right. I was big time. I mean, we made the 4-H hog barn.
Yeah.
And they would bring in a front end loader and scoop up everything into one corner and put down fresh straw. And they'd bring in cement blocks and 2x12s to build a stage. And the only lights were on the band, right? Oh. So every bug in the 4-H hog barn came to meet the band.
Oh, of course,
and
right.
At the end of the gig, there would be legs and wings and stuff between my fingers, and my fingers would be gushy from...
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, professional.
Right.
I mean, absolutely professional.
Yeah.
And the violinist, the fiddle player.
I was going to ask about that.
Turned around to me and said, "Do you all read them spots?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "That's too damn bad." And he turned around and he said, "We're going to pick a little." And I said, "We're going to what?" And he says, "We're going to pick a little." He says, "We're going to start out in G, and we're going to wind ourselves around to D, and then somehow get back to G."
Wow. Well, you knew those letters. It's pretty impressive.
Well, I had 10 years of music theory before I went to college.
Wow.
So,
really?
yeah. And so they started out, and I had keyboard harmony, so I'm doing 1 and 5. Bum, 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 bum. And I think they changed. Bum, 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 right? And so we got done, and he turns around and he says, "Well, kid, that was right good."
Wow. That's great.
So I made it in there, and something happened that changed my life. I grew up in a town of 2,000 people.
Where was that?
It's near the Ohio border on Route 40, which I think now is 70. And it was called Centerville, Indiana. 2,000 people. And about 10 years ago, I had to fill out a form. And they wanted to know something about the town where I grew up. So I looked up on the internet, and they had a website.
The town had a website?
The town had a
Really?
website, and it said Centerville, Indiana, population 2,000 people, plus one old grouch.
Wow, so still 2000?
Still, 2001.
Right.
So it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But we got on a big yellow school bus and went to the city of Indianapolis to hear the Indianapolis Symphony.
Oh.
Now, I'd never heard a symphony orchestra in my life. And so I knew that when we were done, we were going to stamp and clap and hoot and holler and whistle, right? And they were playing a piece called Tchaikovsky's Pathetique Symphony. And when it was done, the conductor didn't cut them off. He just quit, and he held his hands in the air, and there was silence. No one clapped. And slowly he lowered his hands, and nobody in the orchestra moved. And slowly his hands came down, and then the applause started slowly.
Really?
And then grew and grew. And I'm sitting watching this, and I'm realizing that, you know, I'm a macho kid, and I'm crying. I had never experienced that emotion. I could not talk to anybody on the bus all the way back. I don't think I talked to anybody for 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
And then I decided I was going to quit the country western band and be a classical musician.
That was your wow moment.
That was the wow moment that changed my life.
Yeah.
And Tchaikovsky Pathetique Symphony
Wow.
got to me.
What was the first? I'm gonna pause for just a second. I'm noticing that this thing keeps creeping down, and I don't want that to happen. So I think if I raise, I wonder if this will help. If I just raise
It's
it
the
up.
most I've moved in ages.
Yeah, yeah, you're dancing. I don't. This is super cheap setup, so I'm not sure what's. Oh, I see what's pulling it down. Okay.
Oh, the chord's pulling it down.
Yeah, the weight of the cord is. This is super high tech, Michael. There we go.
Sounds like
Okay.
everything I own.
Now it won't move on us. Okay. Oh, let me go this way. Okay. Sorry about that.
But you got to hit play.
No, it's
Okay.
it's continuing to capture all
All right,
this. So
great.
I'll just do it.
Edit out.
And so I was looking at you like this, and what came to my mind was when you said you wanted to change and study composition or classical music.
Right.
What was the first action that you took to do that? Was it like getting a teacher or starting to listen to it? Or?
I started listening to it, and I started paying attention to what was going on and expanding what I was listening to. We should probably... I started writing stuff then in junior high school, arrangements for the band
Really?
and like brass quintets and stuff like that.
Okay. Just self-taught on that?
Yeah, for what my piano teacher could help me out with. I never started trombone lessons until college.
And what brought that on?
Well, I finally figured out that I was not going to be a great piano player, and I played trombone for ages, and I never had any lessons.
Oh.
I should tell you why that happened.
Yeah.
This little small town of 2,000 people had no sports teams that were worth anything, and nobody cared about the sports teams. So they had a great music director who had won like 30 first place state places in the world, in a row, and we had an 80-piece band. Now, to make that even more amazing, from 7th grade through 12th grade, we're 500 kids.
Wow.
There were 80 in my graduating
incredible.
class. there were just 80 kids in my graduating class, and
there's 80 in the band.
and 80 people in the band.
That's incredible.
And the tragic part is, after I graduated, half the male population died in Vietnam, which is how I ended up in the Army band, which is another story. But anyway, in grade school, I was playing piano in school for convocations and stuff. And the band director came to me and said, "Kid, you want to be in the big band?" I'm like in the 6th grade. And I said, "You mean I can be in the high school band?"
Wow.
And he said, "Yeah." He says, "You know music. I don't need to teach you music. You just need to learn how to play an instrument." And he says, "And I have an opening for you." Which was tuba.
Oh, that's not what I thought you were going to say,
So
but that makes sense.
he gave me a tuba in a chair so I could hold it up.
Was it a big double B flat tuba or
Yes.
like? Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Those are the biggest.
The
right?
biggest
Yeah.
tubas you can imagine. I was in the 6th grade, and he says, "Kid, take this home over the summer, and if you get good enough, you can play in the high school band in the fall." So I went back to him in August, and I says, "Well, I know how to play this." And he says, "Well, play something for me." He got me another tuba, and I played it. And he said, "We have a concert coming out. It's outdoor, and I want you to come play." And I'm,
Wow.
Fantastic,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And so I played, and I was always done before everybody else. And I kept thinking, well, I played everything. Why are they still playing, right? And as a piano player, nobody had ever explained to me those things with bars and numbers over them.
Oh no.
So every time I came to a blank measure, I just counted one measure and then started playing again.
Oh no. But it seemed to fit.
Oh,
right?
it's tuba. Who cares?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so that was my introduction, and he put me in the band. And as a piano player, I got tired of tuba parts.
Sure.
And he says, "Kid, I got another opening coming up." And he says, "It's trombone. Are you interested in that?" And I said, "Sure." Yeah. So my parents had to buy a trombone, and they went to the local music store in a bigger city close by. And they had a deal for them. I think he had a trombone he couldn't sell to anybody else. And so he sold it to my parents. Now, are you ready? This was a trombone with a G attachment. You never heard of them.
Never heard of that.
They were developed for a while for student trombone players because with the G trigger, it would automatically go to 4th position and you didn't have to reach very far. Wow,
Okay.
it's right. So
Wow.
I got very good on this and never went past 4th position.
Right. Well, we're about the same size,
Yep.
and that probably made life really good.
Much easier.
Yeah.
But it was a small bore, and the
Okay.
G trigger, I don't think they perfected it like they had the F triggers,
Yeah,
and it didn't have the tone that
Okay.
the open had.
I see. Yeah, so F became the standard that they put all their work behind, I guess.
Right, and I had that G until I got to college and met Bernie Snyder, and he says, "We got to get rid of this."
Right. So you went to same college as Bernie did, and where was that?
No,
Oh.
I was at
Oh.
St. Louis Institute of Music,
Oh.
and Bernie was already in the symphony and an established
Oh,
player
okay.
for years.
I see. Okay.
This college just set up lessons with him because he was the local expert.
Right. What was the St. Louis Music Institute?
St. Louis Institute of Music was founded in the late 20s, just before the Depression, and it was the school in St. Louis, the music school.
Really?
After World War II, everybody who was anybody got a GI Bill and went to St. Louis Institute of Music. St. Louis Institute of Music closed its doors around 1972 and became St. Louis Conservatory of Music.
Okay.
And I haven't any idea when St. Louis Conservatory died, but they went the same way as the Institute. So I just feel that I was institutionalized early and ended up getting my degree.
Right. Right.
Well, all of, do you remember a band called Bob Cuban's band?
Oh, for sure.
Everybody in Bob Cuban's band went through the Institute of Music. And I auditioned for the trombone player for Bob Cuban. And there were two of us, me and Skip Paul Weiser.
Okay.
And Paul got the job because he lived in St. Louis, and Bob Cuban was afraid since I didn't live in St. Louis, I would disappear during holidays and he couldn't depend on me. So my whole career would have been changed if I had been chosen for the Bob Cuban band.
I'll bet.
And Paul went on to play Las Vegas all the time. Yeah.
Really?
He became one of the big set players in Las Vegas.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So, so this was what year then that you finished that degree or finished?
I graduated my undergraduate degree in 1968.
68.
Yeah, probably before you were born.
Not quite. I was born in 65.
Okay.
Yeah. So what did you do after that?
Immediately, I had a degree in theory and composition. Immediately, I got a degree unloading trucks in a warehouse down on 6th Street. Right?
Okay, putting the degree to work.
Putting the music degree to work.
Yeah.
And then I got drafted.
Ah, okay. That's how you ended up in the Army.
That's how I ended up in the Army, because they didn't even have draft numbers. They just sent you letters that said greetings.
Oh boy. How did that make you feel when you got that? Were you expecting it, or
No,
was
no,
it a big surprise?
Not at all. It was a big surprise. And I ended up in the Army, and I was not a good soldier. Musicians don't make good soldiers.
Yeah, but some of these, like, I'd read jazz history class I was pretty good at, and lots of jazz players were from the Army.
Yes. Yes.
So how does one get into the Army and then become a musician? Like, how does that happen?
Well, I took a very circuitous route. I was drafted. I did not enlist. They could tell me to be anything they wanted me to be. And they decided I should be a frontline grunt soldier in the infantry in Vietnam. And I wasn't happy with that.
Yeah.
And I told you I wasn't a good soldier, so we were doing camping out, and it was winter time. I lost my field jacket. I lost my sleeping bag, and they had these things where you had a water hazard and you were supposed to run across logs, and I didn't have that good a balance, so I just dive in and swim to the other side, and I was getting sick, and
from getting cold and
getting
water
cold and water, and I didn't have any equipment. And
so you lost everything.
I lost everything. I don't know what happened. So I woke up one morning in the top bunk, and there's disturbance going on in this ear. And I sort of looked over, and it was the drill sergeant. You get your out of this bunk, and we inform everybody out there. I want you out there. I want you to see your feet on this floor now. And I said, Sarge, I don't think I can do that. I'm sick. The hell you are sick! I want to see you out here now. And I said, now? He said, now! So I threw my legs over the side and jumped, and I never remember hitting the floor. I woke up in the hospital.
How? What happened?
I had pneumonia.
Oh, so you were really sick.
I was very sick.
Yeah.
And so every day I was in the hospital, I wrote a letter to the commander of the band saying that I missed my audition. And after writing, I was in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, and after beginning of the 3rd week, I got a visit from the commander of the band and a couple of band members, and they talked to me about my background and all of that, and I already had music published when I graduated college.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
What music?
Piano music for teaching.
Oh, for instructional stuff. Really?
So they said, we'll look into this and be back to you. And after about another 4 or 5 days, they came back and said, well, we looked into this and your rights were violated. And we have petitioned and we've got our answer. And we have good news and bad news. And I said, it's been a long time since I've had some good news. Let's start with that. And they says, well, actually, we got your orders changed. And when you finish basic training, you will come to the band. And I says, fantastic. What's the bad news?
Right.
And he says, well, you never finished basic, so you have to start all over again. And so I went, see you in 6 weeks, sir.
Wow.
And I went to basic training again, was an even lower achiever than before.
Knowing that part of that might have been knowing that you were not destined to
Right.
be doing any of that stuff that
That's
they're
right.
teaching you, right? So you went right into the band after that.
Right.
And what kinds of things did you guys do? Did you just start like rehearsing to play over where? Like over there in the theater to...
No, I was at Fort Leonard Wood, which is in Missouri.
I've been there.
And it is a training fort.
Okay.
It means every Monday morning, 2,000 new soldiers show up, and we had to play for that event. So every Monday morning, we listened to the general give the same exact speech. For 2 years, I listened to this speech. Everybody in the band had it memorized, but he kept getting lost. And then every Friday, at least 1,000 of those would have made it through basic training, and there would be a pass and review. So we would march down a giant grandstand with all of these troops behind us, and we would do this maneuver and go out this way and turn around and face the stand, and all of these troops would pass, and they'd salute the general, and they would be graduated and they would be official soldiers. So we played every Monday morning and every Friday afternoon, and then we had to play for engineering graduations because it was an engineering fort.
Oh, wow.
And then we would do concerts, and we would be hired to play community events like Better Butter Days at Roby, Missouri, and Homecoming at Leesburg, Missouri, which had 2 paved streets, right? And so that was my life.
Wow.
And we played a lot of marches, and then we played a lot of serious literature. And that also was an 80-piece band, of which only 4 people did not have music degrees.
Really?
Really.
Wow, so it was probably a really good group.
It was an unbelievable group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you were doing marches like Sousa marches
Oh,
and other stuff?
Sousa marches, King Cotton, and all of those, you know.
Yeah. Did that seep into your composing mind at all?
Yes, it did. It made me not do any of it.
Great example of what you didn't want to do. Yeah. So not much. Well, I guess we're influenced from day one. It all mixes in. So but you were conscious of how you did not want to create stuff
Marches.
like that. Yeah.
No. I got out of the Army 2 months early to go to graduate school. And 3 days after getting out of the Army, I was in graduate school at Washington University.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was the music program like there? Graduate in music composition, or?
Yeah, I was studying composition, but the WashU music department was basically a musicology department.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was very rigorous academically, no matter what you were doing. And at that time, I started graduate school in 1970, and that was 70s were a time of experimentation. So they decided to use me as a guinea pig. So they sent me to multimedia department in the art department to work
with tech,
with technical and cross disciplines and stuff like that. And I worked with a very famous guy named Howard Jones, and he is in the art books as the founder of electronic art.
Wow.
Yeah, and
how did that affect you? How did that influence you?
well, it allowed me to just be crazy. I watched he would sit in a chair in the front of the room, and one by one each of the graduate art students would go up and propose an idea to him. And he would say, "No, go away, come up with another idea." So I'm watching all this, so I went up to Howard and I said, "Howard, I figured out that there are these plants that generate electricity in the millivolt range. And I'd like to use these plants to control synthesizers." And he said, "I like it. I have an exhibit coming up." He says, "Make it happen." So I went to the botany department to find these plants, and they said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to show you that." And so they taught me electron microscope photography.
Oh, wow.
And there's this plant that only grows in the streams of Missouri. It's called stonewort, and its Latin name is Carabraniae. And you can find it in aquariums for fish.
Oh, purposefully.
Purposely.
Really?
And its cells are elongated, and the plasma in the cell does a helix, makes a figure 8.
Okay.
And as it runs in this helix, it generates electricity in the millivolt range. And so they taught me how to isolate one of these and stick electrodes in it. And then we do horrible things to it. We change its pH level, right? And we put ice water in its water. We boil its water. We pour cyanide in the water.
Whoa.
And before it died, it was always scream. And
really?
Really.
And you, how would the synthesis happen?
Well, what we did was, at that time, there was no direct interface. So we recorded all of its data. And so just before it would die, it would put out all the energy it had, and it would go, wow! And then
And
die.
then it would die.
Yeah. And so I got 3 different keyboards and assigned data points to all the notes on the keyboards, and then played it in time, actual time that the plant was experiencing this. So you could then hear what the plant did.
Yeah.
Because the actual sound is much below our hearing. Okay. And so then I was in an exhibit called, are you ready for this? The Sound of Algae. And it had a continuous cassette player, and it would play all this, and I would say what was happening to it. Wow. And it was in a monolith, so all the equipment was there, and a slide projector that had pictures of the electron microscope and the plants themselves, and then the cells and the equipment and all of that. And then it does a slideshow as you hear the stuff. And the opening was at the Kansas City Art Institute, all right? And it was just god awful. It sounded like a bunch of police sirens, you know?
Yeah.
It was just god awful.
Yeah.
And
but interesting though.
But very interesting. It's very much a conceptual piece because you learn these plants are living and you get to hear what happens to them.
Right. Right.
But the guards at the Art Institute decided to go on strike because they couldn't stand the sound.
Oh.
So Howard Jones and I got in the car and drove to Kansas City and negotiated with the guards. And we finally came to an understanding that if there was no one in the gallery to look at it or hear it, they could unplug it.
Okay.
All right. And as we're driving away, Howard says, "You know, Michael, they're never going to plug it in."
Oh, no. Right, they'll leave it unplugged.
They'll just leave it unplugged,
yeah,
right?
Right.
And so I got to know the people in the botany department because I worked with them, and I actually got to also meet people in biomedical engineering.
Oh, that's fascinating. Are there still recordings of this available anywhere?
I have cassette recordings of them.
Really?
At least they're not 8-track.
Right. Yeah. That's another loop. That's gosh, that's really amazing. How did you then get going on like the next phase of your composition?
Well, I was taking composition lessons and I started writing things and started writing a symphony piece. And this is going to be my dissertation. You had to have a major work and then a minor paper. So I knew this was going to be my major work, and on the other side of sending me to multidiscipline, for a PhD you have to have 2 languages, and it's usually French and German or Italian because that's musicology. But they decided that my second language, my first language was German, and my second language could be computer programming.
Of course.
So my second language was Fortran with Watt 4 and Watt 5. Okay. And I was working on the IBM 2000,
Okay.
which took up 2 floors of one building, and
Wow.
everything was interfaced with punch cards.
Oh man.
So
Wow.
my minor dissertation was a 3,000 card deck.
Wow.
And it took Hindemith's rules of composition for 2 voices and did them.
Oh my gosh.
So it wrote Hindemith's exercises according to what I had programmed.
Right.
And then I had to come to a conclusion, and my conclusion was, with the Hindemith rules, you have to start and end on the same note.
Mm-hmm.
And the intervals are all specified how they link together, but the crucial thing is it has to end a certain way for the last 2. So the hardest thing is to get between here and here, because these are specified, but to get to here
Isn't. Right.
So the way the computer was working then is you just give it the rules and you throw a random generator at it, and this is your first note. And it drops them through all the rules. And if it makes it through the rule, it gets kept.
Okay.
And it would fail every time between here and here, but a few times it would make it. So, out of like 2,000 runs, I would get maybe 30 that actually worked. And what I figured out was the computer only sees where it is at the moment, but a human can look forward and decide his choices here, how they're going to work out over here.
Wow. That's interesting how the computer needs the human,
Right.
and vice versa.
Exactly, because the computer will only do what it's told to do at this point, but it's coming. At this point, it can't make future decisions on its own.
Right.
But that's changing.
Yeah.
And it's changing quickly.
Yeah. Do you pay attention to current technology?
Oh, yeah.
You do.
Oh, yeah.
What's the most fascinating thing that you're seeing these days?
There's no need for coders or programmers. You can now tell that computer, I want you to get from here to here. And I don't care how you do it. I just need an answer, and it will do it.
Instead of needing to code Fortran or
Right.
any language.
Or any language.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you work with this stuff?
Oh, no, I don't know enough.
Oh, okay.
No, it just fascinates me.
Yeah.
It's like life. I don't know anything about life, but it just fascinates me.
Right. Right. I mean, all this talk about artificial intelligence, you've kind of seen it from the beginning almost.
From the beginning, working with punch cards. It's
Right.
like a long time ago, you used to get a gas bill that was a computer punch card. And on that punch card was all your information, and it had the new amount that you owed. So I would take those gas bills and take them to the computer room and put them in the punch card and change all the numbers and then send it back in.
And then pay the lower bill.
Pay the
hopefully.
lower bill until they started saying, we're having a problem with your account. When I decided to quit that.
Yeah. Good decision. You don't want to end up in utility jail.
So my major piece for orchestra ended up being my dissertation. And I was sitting at home one night, and I get a call, and he says, "Hello, this is Leonard Slotkin."
Get out.
And I know, okay, I'll play along. I got a lot of friends who play jokes on
you think
me.
they're pranking you?
They're pranking me, so
Yeah.
I'll play along. "Oh, hi, Leonard, how are you?"
Oh,
And
no.
he goes on and he says, I've been asked to go to this festival in Los Angeles for young conductors. We're the same age.
Okay.
And he said, I have to bring a young composer and showcase one of his works, and I'd like to take your work. And I'm going, great.
Because you still think it's a joke.
It's a joke, right? And he says, well, and we talk for a while, and he says, well, here's this number. This is my secretary. Call her in the morning, and she'll give you all the details. And I can't wait to call this number in the morning to see
Yeah.
who this idiot is who's pranking me. And it was real. And so he chose my dissertation piece to play with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. So my dissertation was verified by the Los Angeles Philharmonic, but I had written one movement. And so Leonard says, well, I want to play this with the St. Louis Symphony.
Whoa.
And I said, well, is it okay if I write the second movement? He said, yeah, go ahead and write the second movement. So it had half a premiere in Los Angeles and the whole premiere in St. Louis.
How amazing.
Yeah.
Well, so that must have been an incredible feeling.
Well, I peaked early. It was amazing. I had no clothes.
Oh.
I had to buy a suit to go to the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and I never thought about buying shoes.
Oh no.
So I showed up at the Los Angeles Philharmonic in my new suit and my hiking boots.
Which is what they're wearing now.
Which is now, I was way ahead of my time just because I was ignorant.
Right. Right. That must have been an incredible feeling to listen to your symphony played by an amazing group.
First-rate musicians,
Right.
Absolutely first-rate musicians. And it sort of made me say, well, you got to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And at that time, everybody was 12-tone. 12-tone music was, if you weren't writing 12-tone music, you weren't a composer.
Right.
And I didn't like it.
Yeah. What
And-
didn't you like about it? The composition of it or the sound of it?
The sound of it.
Uh-huh.
And I did a lot of experiments with my students when I was teaching. I would play strict 12-tone music, even serial music, and then I would play a totally improvised piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask them which one is which.
Oh,
And they could
tell?
never do it.
Really, they couldn't tell.
You couldn't tell the difference between total serialism and totally improvised.
Really,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I would think that that you'd be able to. I think initially I feel like I'd be able to tell the difference, but maybe not.
But you're a trained musician. These were students who
Okay.
were just showing up there.
Right.
And they couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
About that time, Miles Davis came out with a new album called In a Silent Way.
Yeah.
I bought this album and I played it. At this time, there are records and LPs.
Sure.
I started listening to it at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I just kept turning it over and replaying it till 4 in the morning.
Wow.
And I thought, there's something here that speaks to me. And I had to get rid of this total control of musicians. I thought, these are brilliant musicians.
Right.
And Miles Davis is allowing them to be musicians.
Right.
So I had to work out a way to do that. So I worked for 2 months to work out a new notation system
Oh.
that was graphic, that controlled everything in the composition, but not when they came in. Right? So every note is specified. The point of the order of which they come in is specified. But exactly when they come in is up to them, because they have to listen to other people and say, what I need is this, and that fits in with that.
Oh, how amazing.
And so the musicians are playing off each other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if there is a conductor, he just says, you're next.
Right.
And then they sit there and they say, now.
Yeah.
And,
Really
and it's
different take
not
on
now, it's now.
it.
And it makes it so organic
Yeah.
and so alive.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of something I saw John Zorn doing on
Oh, yeah.
stage.
Exactly.
With just the kind of improvisation that you get from that, and yet you're controlling part of it as a composing.
Exactly
as a
like
composer.
Frank Zappa.
Right. Right.
Frank Zappa had the most amazing musicians, and all he did was have cues. And
Right.
his hand signals would tell them what they were supposed to do.
Yeah. Were you into Zappa?
Oh, I bought everything Zappa ever did.
Really? Really? That is
Exactly.
so amazing. So when I'm listening to your compositions, that you shared, you said, check this out, check this out. I didn't pick up on any of this.
Well, you won't hear any Frank Zappa, but he's in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
To
you...
describe my music, I had a reviewer once who gave me the most beautiful handle. He said that I was an impressionistic minimalist.
I love it.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
And that's basically what I'm after.
Wow.
It's that impressionistic feeling,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still minimal.
Yeah, yeah. So you were writing then for different sizes of groups?
Everything from small ensembles to small ensembles with electronics to orchestra.
And it was being performed. Was the symphony doing more and more of your stuff?
More junior symphonies. I had, Illinois, where was that? The Bremerton Symphony in Washington.
Okay.
The real Bremerton musicians.
Yeah. Right.
And New Mexico and around. But I've had things played from Sarajevo and Novi Sad in what was Yugoslavia, England, Ireland, because I lived in Ireland for a year, and across the United States, and then Hong Kong and Tasmania.
Okay.
The biggest disappointment was Tasmania because it was real people. It wasn't those little devils.
Oh. That's hilarious. When I first started Google searching, right after we got off the phone, but before I received your email that you sent, I was like, "Oh, this can't be the guy. This is over in Ireland." Oh, this can't be this guy. And then I realized these are all you.
Yeah.
So you've done so much. You've done so many different kinds of things, and all through this time.
Still playing jazz and classical music.
Yeah, and still playing trombone.
And still playing trombone up until 2000.
Right. What kinds of trombone gigs were you playing?
Oh, when I was in college, I started playing with Archie Burnside. Now, Archie Burnside is one of the founders of big band music in St. Louis.
Really?
And at that time, I was with the African American Union up over in Newstead somewhere.
There were two different unions?
There were two different. That's why it says 2-197. 2 was the white union, 197 was the black union.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
That's how old I am. And then I started playing with George Hudson. And George Hudson was African American band, and he was a territory touring band. He had the Southwest Territory just before World War II.
Okay.
And George was very good friends with Count Basie.
Right. Okay.
And when Count Basie's charts got old and worn, he would send them to George.
Okay.
So it wouldn't say second trombone; it would have the trombone player's name on it.
Right.
From Basie's band.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my education was furthered greatly by being in George's band.
So you played with George. I heard about George Hudson from Dennis Owsley's book.
Yep.
And got to play in a concert where we recreated music from the book, and we did a George Hudson
fantastic
song. We all arranged it ourselves, so I didn't actually get to read the same charts.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that name. I didn't know who he was before that, and so
he was a great man. He was the band director at where all the strip clubs are north of East St. Louis, and at the time that I was playing with him, that part of the east side made East St. Louis look like the suburbs.
Yeah, Centerville, I think, wasn't it called?
North of Centerville, and it's got another name where the strip clubs are. My memory gets bad. But I loved it, absolutely loved it, and I was the only white boy in the band, and I was always referred to as the soda cracker.
Shortened to cracker later, I
Right,
guess.
yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so this was when, the 70s still, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right after the Army, because I played with a lot of these guys in the Army band, and when they came back to St. Louis, they needed trombone players. They'd call me, because I'd been playing trombone so many hours a day in the Army. I had chops, and because of my classical background, I could read anything.
Right.
Couldn't put anything in front of me I couldn't read.
Yeah, that's I was working with a student yesterday, and we were talking about reading, and he's just starting out, and I'm remembering how difficult reading was for me, and so we came up with some ways that got him to focus on one line at a time and moving down to just the next line. And I thought, reading is really kind of a difficult thing for some.
For a lot of people.
Yeah.
But see, I had piano lessons starting at 7, and I had 10 years of music theory before I went to college.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that was never a problem.
Yeah.
I should tell you about the band audition for the Army band.
Oh, sure.
If you did not enlist, if you enlisted, didn't matter if you didn't play an instrument, they'd send you to the Navy school to learn how to play and then put you in a band later. Right?
Really?
But to get in just off the street, they had a sheet of music on a stand, and it had 10 lines. And you'd sit down with the guy next to you, and he says, line 1, go.
Wow.
Line 2, go. As soon as you made a mistake, you were out.
Oh.
You had to sight read all 10 lines to pass.
Oh man, sudden death.
Sudden death.
Yeah. Wow. So I want to kind of get back to Leonard Slatkin.
Okay.
Because he's a superstar.
Yes.
Did you keep a relationship with him? Did you keep working with him?
For a few years.
What kinds of things did you guys do together then?
He programmed a lot of my chamber music.
Oh, okay.
So they would have chamber concerts on stage or in another venue. I would get things played there. And then he got more and more famous, and I got more and more obscure.
So that was that.
That was that. We parted ways.
Yeah. When you'd have a piece rehearsed and then performed, were there ever instances where you'd hear things and make notes and have to do revisions, or were your charts pretty good right off the bat?
No. Once a piece was done, I was done with it.
Oh, okay.
There was no way I would go back.
Yeah. And there were no issues like people scratching their head like, what do you mean here, or any of that?
No.
Yeah.
I'd been in bands long enough, and
you knew how to write them.
To know what players could do. And I would never ask them to do something outrageous just because I thought it might happen. I gave them freedom, but only this much. You know.
And you're also doing this experimental work simultaneously, like concurrently, I guess. And so you're never like accidentally mixing in something kind of experimental. No, you're kind of keeping those separate.
And I finally gave up electronics. I had a piece I had written for trumpet, electronic keyboard, Echoplex, and percussion. And Echoplex is an old electronic instrument.
Yeah, can you describe what that
it was
piece
basically
of looked like?
a cassette that was about this big, that had a continuous loop in it.
Okay.
And it was probably at least a 2-minute loop.
Okay.
And whatever you put into it, you could then choose the length of echoes with a little sliding knob.
Okay.
So it would be bop, bop, or it would be bop, bop, bop. And so all of these things that I wrote, I would control the echoes, and I would control basically the trumpet player would push into the machine, and the keyboard player would push into the machine, but not the percussion player. too much to mic.
Okay. Yeah.
And so this piece was being played at a national trumpet convention. And we got to rehearsal and we're on the stage and we set up all the equipment and the Echoplex machine started spitting out all the tape onto the floor.
Oh no.
And I'm looking down and there's just a pile of tape on the floor and we can't do the piece and there's no way to get another Echoplex or another cartridge. So I took the tape and straightened it out and took a microphone stand and put off stage about 30 feet away from the machine. And it worked perfectly.
Really?
But the tape just went off stage and then would come
moved
back
all the way
and
around.
move back through the machine. And everybody was like, man, how did you know how far to move that tape off stage?
Right. How did you?
All I did was push it until it was taut.
That's really
because
amazing.
it couldn't make a bow in it or it would get caught on something.
Right.
And it would catch the tape underneath it.
Yeah.
So it had to be separated.
Right.
And it had to be taut.
Yeah.
But not so tight that it would slip on the cassette feeds, the rollers that pulled it through.
How did the transition from tape to digital enter into your into your scope, or had you just not been doing electronic by that time?
At that time it was like Moog synthesizers.
Oh, were you able to mess around with those?
Yeah, I played with those. And they're terribly unstable.
Really?
Because humidity, you can put the knobs in the exact same place, but humidity will move the molecules and change things.
Oh man.
Temperature will change things.
Really?
Yes.
Did you ever get to work with him on this?
No, never met him.
Never met him.
Never met him.
Well, how would they manage that? I mean, they must have known the shortcomings of that technology.
If you found something you like, you would put it on tape and then use it later. Because you can never hit the same knobs again.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think about the pioneering days
you
of
get close.
Yeah.
But not exactly what you had.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then this machine blowing up, I decided I'm not doing electronics anymore.
Okay, so that was it.
That was it.
Yeah, you don't want to be on the concert and have it go bonkers.
I can't watch it blow up because performances are hard to get.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So by the 80s then, what were you writing? Who were you writing for? Were you traveling all around at that point?
At the 80s, I was teaching full-time at Fontbonne.
Oh,
College.
really? Okay.
I was the composer in residence at Fontbonne. And so I was also involved with, let me get this organization right. It was an organization, a national organization of composers, and they changed their name. And I get them mixed up now.
Okay.
And I'm no longer a member because it was university composers. And so they would have conventions every year. And for many years, I would have a performance every year at some college, and they would put a group together to play this. And there would be 2 concerts in the morning, 2 concerts in the afternoon, and 1 concert in the evening for a week. And I would go, and after the end of the week, I could only remember 2 things. The piece I absolutely loved, and the piece I absolutely hated.
The best and the worst.
The best and the worst. Everything else is just a blur.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Too much new music at once will just kill you.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So lots of traveling, lots of composing for different commissions. Were you commissioned?
I was getting commissions. I was a member of ASCAP, and I was getting $500 to $1,000 a year in royalties.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
2 years ago, I got a check for 61 cents.
Wow, so the highest of the highs. And
I told you I peaked early.
Yeah. Well, I got my first check from ASCAP,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't even expecting that, so I
Mhm.
had to call them. And,
What is this?
yeah, well, and being a data analytics person,
Uh-huh.
and getting on the ASCAP website, the analytics are terrible.
They're absolutely terrible. It's
Yeah.
all based on synchronicity and chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
because they made it sound like, oh yeah, this is going to be every month now.
Oh, no, huh?
No, I haven't seen a
No.
single
Check
thing.
Simpson. No,
Yeah.
you have to be in their random survey. You know, and it's like say WNYC Chicago,
Uh-huh.
#1 radio station, right?
Yeah.
They sample it maybe twice a month.
Okay, well that explains that. I literally, one of the songs for my album was played 4 times, and I got this money, and I thought, okay, well when the other 126 times
Right.
come in, I'm going to be rich,
Right,
But then I
yeah.
haven't seen anything
No,
since.
no.
So
You got to fall in the random survey.
okay, yeah, that's amazing.
The-
But that's really cool though that you're. But they were hiring you to write stuff, like when you said
I would
you
I would get commissions. People would commission me to write things.
Can you give an example of what that might have looked like, or what one of them was, or just so we can get an idea of what that means?
I had a commission that was arranged through the Missouri Arts Council, and if you were a not-for-profit community symphony, you could apply, and if they liked it, they would give you the money for the commission.
Mm-hmm.
So the Springfield Symphony in Springfield, Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
applied, and they won, and I was commissioned $5,000 to write this piece for orchestra.
Ah.
Well, I'm writing in graphic notation. So I wrote this piece for orchestra based on an Irish tune, because I love Irish music.
Mm-hmm.
I love living there.
Mm.
And so I finished it and I sent it off to the conductor, and he calls me and he says, "This is impossible." And I says, "What do you mean it's impossible?" And he says, "Well, there's no bar lines. How am I going to tell them when to come in?" He says, "I can't do this." And I said, "Can you promise me you'll try one thing?" I said, "At the rehearsal, before they ever see the music, have somebody start eighth notes. Bum, 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 bum," because the eighth notes never change through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, then you put the music in front of them, and you say, when I point to you, you fit into these eighth notes.
Huh.
And when I point to you, you fit into these eighth notes. And if I'm pointing to him and I tell you to go out, you just stop. And he says, "I'll try it, but there's no way in hell this is going to work." And so I knew what day they were rehearsing, and it was about, probably 10:30. My phone rings, and the guy's literally jumping up and down on the phone saying, "This is amazing! It worked! It's so much fun!" He says, I'm like in a recording studio, bringing these guys in, taking these guys out." And he says, "It all fits together, and it works perfect." And I said, "Great."
Oh man, what a feeling. That must have been great.
Well, that was my first chance to do it for orchestra.
Okay.
And it was the first time I tried it.
Yeah.
And it works.
And did you keep trying more of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that until the 90s, when commissioning and money fell through.
Oh, what
For
happened
music.
to do that? Or what changed?
The economy.
Mm.
The economy has always dictated what kind of ensembles get played.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Stravinsky was writing for full orchestra for all those ballets. World War I happens. He has no concert outlets. He has no musicians. He starts writing for small ensembles, right?
Interesting. Right.
And this ebb and flow has always happened, totally combined to economics.
Yeah, it's so funny you said that.
Yeah.
My student last night said, "I wonder how." What did he say? How did bands get? why did bands get smaller? And I said, well, Duke Ellington came off the road because
World War II.
Yeah.
You can't get tires, you can't get gasoline, and they had a cabaret tax.
Right. All these economic influences.
And all of his players were drafted.
Oh, and that's something I didn't even think of.
Right.
And
And
but
so
yeah,
what
all
you've
those
got
things.
left is a bunch of old guys who aren't being in the army,
Right.
and they can only put small groups together.
Right. Hence
Economics.
The small group. Yeah, it's incredible. Do you ever look at music today and think about these economics of today and where it's heading for music? Or like do you have any thoughts about what's happening today in music because of economics or technology?
Technology and education are killing music.
How so?
Music's not being taught in the schools anymore. There's no more music education for people who aren't going to be musicians. And those are the consumers. They have no knowledge of music that they can't hear on the radio. They have no knowledge of music that they can't call up on Spotify. And so the only thing they do, and you're aware of this, the music you heard in high school is music you listen to for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's no way to break the mold because there's nothing in the schools to tell them that there's anything else out there. They have to stumble into it.
Right.
And, people don't like change.
Yeah.
You want me to listen to what?
Yeah.
Go listen to Come Out for a while by Steve Wright.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's interesting to talk to younger people about music and what they're listening to. I'm always asking my son when he plays something new for me, well, where did you hear that? And he can't even really tell me.
No. And the thing about it is, with all the digital technology, you no longer have to be a musician.
Yeah.
You take something you like, you get yourself a drum machine.
Right.
And you just put bits together.
Yeah, you chop it up.
And there is no, classical music, we spend a lot of time in analysis. How was this put together? How was it built? Why does it hang together?
Yeah.
Well, only now it hangs together because it's got a good beat and it's got a hook.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I listened to Around C.
Yes.
And I loved the whole mood that it put me in and the pulse of it. I immediately saw cinematically, it's picturesque to me. Really loved the piece.
Well, thank you.
Do you, what made you suggest that one to me? You suggested like 3 or 4 things.
I suggested those to you because they were available on YouTube.
Okay.
And you could get to them easily.
Yeah.
If you want to hear other things, I have CD and I can put you on, what's it called? Anyway, you dump things into it and then you allow other people to get in there.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, me too. But I have a lot of things on there.
So when I pulled that up and it was on YouTube, who has that score? Was that
the score is all written out.
Yeah. So I mean, how did the score?
That's in Sibelius.
Oh, and then that's you made that video of it. Okay.
Yes.
So it was the weirdest thing. I'm listening, and I don't know if you'll remember this, but I made a note. It was measure 182. And the strings come in. It's after this sort of piano trill, and the strings come in, and they're playing in this pizzicato way. But it sounded like there was another effect in there. And I looked at the score. I pulled my car over. I was listening in my car, looking at the YouTube, driving, and I'm going back and listening again.
Being a perfect example of a good driver.
Yeah, just like terrible. Luckily, my wife doesn't watch this webcast, and she won't hear this story. But I did pull over, and I looked. I pulled it up as big as I could, and it was just, violoncello and the next instrument up, just playing pizzicato. That was the only notation. And yet, it really sounded. Are those real instruments, or is that a MIDI recording of...
That's Sibelius's instruments.
It is,
Yeah.
okay. So it could just be the timbre of...
It could be the timbre that work together, and one of the things I learned looking at a lot of Mahler scores, Mahler scores are huge,
Mm-hmm.
and he writes things that it's impossible to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But those instruments influence other instruments, and it changes the overtones of the other instruments.
Right, okay. That's an interesting
Some things,
thing.
times that happens.
Have you always been Sibelius versus Finale, or have you used both?
No. When the economy went bad, I figured out I used drafting equipment to do these scores.
Mm-hmm.
And to ink it, after it's all laid out on preliminary paper,
Mm-hmm.
all the pages are 11 by 17.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes 2 hours a page to ink it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you have to draw the circles and the lines and the arrows and the notes, and you have to draw all of the staffs.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
And
okay.
then ink in the notes.
Yeah.
So it takes 2 hours a page, and a piece would be 70 pages long. And it hit me that nobody can pay me for this.
Right.
No
Right.
matter how much the commission is, it doesn't cover the time.
Yeah.
And so I was going to give up composing. I said there aren't any commissions anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's useless to put all this time into this score. And my oldest son said, "Dad, there's something new out. I'm going to buy you the student version." And he bought me the student version of Sibelius, and I started playing with it. And the most amazing part for me was, hey, it plays it back for me.
Yes.
Whatever I write, it just spits it back at me.
Yeah.
And I can hear it.
Yeah.
And I don't have to wait a year for musicians to get together for
Right.
me to hear it.
Yeah.
And so I quit all graphics, and it changed the way I wrote music.
It did.
It did, because I had to figure out a way to be tied to bars and downbeats to still have the feeling of it's time for this musician to come in.
So that's really interesting.
So I'm still after that organic feel.
Yeah.
And it's like I usually take a well-known melody,
Mm-hmm.
and I say, okay, this is the first note of the melody, this is the second note, and if the note repeats, well, that happened back here.
Mm-hmm.
So I write a tone row of just the new notes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then I start out everything I can do with one note. And then what about 2 notes? And then maybe 3 notes, right? And I go through the order, and you have no idea what the melody is until all the notes happen near the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when was this, when did you get this Sibelius student version? Do you remember what year that was? I'm curious.
I'm thinking it's about around 2000.
So that's when it was fairly new, I guess.
Oh, it was very new.
Yeah.
And then I bought the professional version. Much better.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What changed from the student to the professional? Do you remember?
You get more instruments, you get a lot more effects, you get a lot more control. It will do crescendos and decrescendos.
Mm-hmm.
It will do all kinds of effects.
Mm-hmm. Tempo changes?
You can do tempo changes. You can even do rubatos.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, that's something I haven't... I've just recently started exploring tempo changes. I hadn't thought of rubato. I use Finale, and
Okay.
there's different settings for
Different
playback
setting.
and stuff.
And the reason I didn't go with Finale is I came to digital software late.
Uh-huh.
And I started out in software.
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, Finale was Microsoft,
Uh-huh.
and Sibelius was Apple.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to learn all those tunes, because when you're doing software, if you want to do ABC, to stop that, you've got to do CBA.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn all the codes to make that happen.
Uh-huh.
And Sibelius has a lot of codes you have to memorize
Oh.
to make it happen.
Okay.
Sibelius is all drop-down menus.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's much
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah, for sure.
Huh.
Do you still use that? Do you still compose and
All the time.
All the time.
I'm writing all the time with
Really?
Sibelius.
and is that just for personal gratification, or are you getting commissions or doing it for
No,
other-
if I write a piece, I get to hear it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter to me if nobody else does anymore. I
Yeah.
quit. At some point, I got old and decided that, I don't need to be famous.
Right. Right. And you didn't need the commissions anymore.
I'm retired. I live
Yeah.
on Social Security.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, you deserve it. You earned it, right?
I no longer have to play politics.
Yeah.
I no longer have to grovel.
Right. Begging for money. Did you, when you were just a youngster and composing, how did you hear ahead of time what it was going to sound like? Do you just have a really good ear in your brain that you can see and hear what it's going to sound like?
I always knew what it was going to sound like. Even the graphic pieces that I did, which will never sound the same twice,
Right.
but they'll always sound the same.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's a very Zen thing.
Uh-huh.
Even in the aleatoric parts, I know how those aleatoric parts are going to come into my ears. I wish I could explain that, but I can't.
Or teach it. You can't teach that.
No, it just happens in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. Well, so how about one parting story? Is there?
I got a trombone story for
Oh,
you.
please. Okay, great.
I had the chance to play with Oliver Nelson.
Oh my God, you're kidding. Okay, he's
I'll-
one of my favorites.
Well, Oliver Nelson went to school at Washington University.
I didn't know that.
His composition teacher was my composition teacher.
Okay.
And so he has ties to St. Louis. He grew up here. And he graduated from Washington University. And he likes my teacher, Robert Wykes, who unfortunately I buried 2 years ago.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
And so I got to be in the pickup band because he brought Oliver Nelson back to play a concert at Washington University. So at this time I'm in college, right?
Wow.
I just started trombone lessons for real, but I can read and I can play.
Yeah.
So rehearsal's 2:00. So I get there early, and I'm setting up and I'm sitting here waiting. Oliver Nelson comes in. Wow, there's Oliver Nelson, right? And I'm going to play with Oliver Nelson.
Yeah.
And 2:00 comes and he says, well, we have to cancel. And everybody says, what do you mean cancel? He says, well, we're missing a second tenor player. How can we work on ensemble if there's a person missing? I went, man. And the sax player rushes in at the last minute. He says, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to set up and tune. And so we tuned, right? So he comes up and the first piece is an entire ensemble. On one note, ba, right? So he comes up in front of us and he goes, ba, cuts us off and says, second alto, you're sharp. Third trumpet, you're flat. First trombone, you played the wrong note.
Oh.
And I'm sitting here going,
Oh
my God.
Yeah.
I was scared to death to pick up my horn.
Yeah.
Because he heard and knew everything that was happening.
Wow.
He was that good.
That's amazing.
I talked to my teacher, Robert Wykes, and I said, Oliver's written so much music. How can he do that? He's doing TV shows, he's doing movies, and he's working all the time. How does he do that? And he says, I'll tell you, Michael, Oliver made books, and he has a book of accompaniment figures. So page 10, number 2 is one accompanying figure.
Okay.
Page 10, number 3 is a different accompaniment figure. He has a book organized the same way for orchestrations. He has a book the same way for rhythms that he wants. So when he gets a commission, he writes a new melody and he says it to his copyist. Measures 1 to 8, page 3, number 4. Measures 8 through 12, page 10, number 2.
Okay.
And the accompanist has the book. He does the orchestration that asked for. He does the rhythm that's asked for. He has the accompaniment figures that are asked for, and all that Oliver Nelson had to do was give him the scheme. He never wrote the score.
Wow.
The copyists
copyists
did the notes. They showed up, and
Yeah.
it was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an amazing experience to work with such a legend.
It was phenomenal. I was scared to death the same way I was scared to that first rehearsal with the symphony.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, let's wrap it up.
Okay. Great.
This has really been great. Once again, my guest today has been Michael F. Hunt, Doctor.
Yeah, I did one of those, yes.
Okay, Dr. Michael F. Hunt, world-class composer, trombonist, and it's just been my pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's been
Thanks so
enjoyable.
much. Thank you so much.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Please listen, like, and subscribe. Every Thursday we drop a new episode, so please check out all of the webcasts about trombonists. And thanks again, Mike.